Poker is a difficult game to adapt because its appeal is social. The base mechanics are not usually more complex than drawing and discarding cards, but that simple baseline is interesting in a context where you make socially informed decisions. Unlike chess or Go, where computers can more or less stand in for a human opponent, making a poker AI is difficult because a good one has to replicate nuanced social behaviors. Some games go to the extra effort of trying to fill that social gap with advanced AIs. Others embraced online play once it was available. These approaches work fine, but I like the approach that Balatro takes. Instead of trying to fill that social void, so it can be as much like traditional poker as possible, Balatro goes the other direction and fleshes out the hand-building side of the game, making it deep enough to carry the entire game without needing other players. Instead of chasing what was lost in adaptation, Balatro expanded the part that could more easily make that transition.
In Society of the Snow, Pablo Vierci alternates between two timelines, a chronology of the Uruguayan plane crash and a recollection from each survivor. In narrative tandem, the events of 1972 remain in the constant present, as if suspended outside space and time, or as one survivor puts it, not alive, but not dead either. In Juan Antonio Bayona's adaptation, film becomes this suspension of time. It's in the omniscient narration of Numa, the last boy to die. It's in the cameos of the survivors, watching themselves as the events unfurl. When Alive firmly bookends its version with a commentary from an aged survivor, it distances us from the tragedy in the past. At the end of Society of the Snow, the audience remain with the boys, nestled on that hospital floor, looking out to the cinematic skies of 72, not alive, but not dead either.
All the way back in 1964, Marshall McLuhan wrote that the medium is the message, which is to say, I should understand by now that what a thing means can't be separated from what the thing is. But I've never felt it quite so keenly as watching the Fallout TV series this year. Because here's the problem with adapting a video game for TV. Games operate on moon logic.
We're just going to strong-arm him, and he will say, okay, I'll blow up my place of employment. Because if you crouch, explosions aren't as loud. Common sense.
And so when you see this in a video game, it's just kind of funny. But when you see this in the realistic VFX of an Amazon-backed big-budget studio TV show, it feels, ugh. And when you do this in a video game, it feels normal. Sure, that's what hacking a computer looks like, but when you see a real human doing it in real life, the stupidity of this system is so obvious that the suspension of disbelief just melts away. I loved the Fallout show, but more than anything else, it made me remember, the medium is the message.
In the book Ender's Game, one of the first characters Ender meets is a bully named Bernard. They butt heads a few times early in the story, but they eventually develop a begrudging respect for one another. At the end of the story, Ender is gearing up to face off against the aliens, and all his closest friends are gathered to fight alongside him. Bernard's not there though, and of course he isn't, why would he be? He and Ender stopped hating each other, but they never got that close. Years after I read this book, the movie adaptation came out, and at the end, Ender is gearing up to face off against the aliens, and the camera's about to pan and show that all his friends are there with him, and I have this thought. Bernard's gonna be there. And he was. Why is he here? And how did I know he was gonna be here? In a book, you're free to go on all kinds of tangents, but in a movie, everything needs to be tight. Since you have to introduce things visually, there's way less room for detailed info. A movie audience can only keep track of so many characters, so while a book can have a character like Bernard phase out of the story over time, a movie has to get every bit of mileage they can out of this guy. So Bernard keeps showing up again and again and again, to make sure your effort in remembering who he was not wasted.
Mario Puzo's The Godfather was adapted to film by Francis Ford Coppola in 1972, and to video games in 2006 by EA Redwood Shores. The latter makes an irresistible offer to fans of the former, to integrate themselves into the tapestry of Coppola's epic, and directly influence how that story unfolds. Using the template of a crime sandbox, the player is tasked to commit the racketeering operations that empowered the Corleone crime family, and are rewarded with just a glimpse of the glamour depicted on film. Far from the epic storytelling that made The Godfather a classic, EA's rigid adherence to structure creates a compelling alternative. Where the film renders the Corleones' lives in chiaroscuro lighting, EA's game depicts these scenes in flattened shading, drawing a direct parallel between the mysticism of being the head of a crime family and the dull reality of enforcing it. Perhaps not as compelling a proposal, but a great demonstration of how the medium affects the stories we adapt.
My honest answer is none. I have given no thought to this at all. Adaptation is the practice of losing that which is most served by the medium. Adaptations are made primarily out of fear that doing something new is too risky. Audiences may not buy it. Audiences pursue adaptations because life is hard, finances are limited, so choose the safe option. New is more interesting, so let's create something new. Wait. Creativity is not merely making something new out of whole cloth. Creativity is always the recreation of experiences, values of things which came before us, now delivered through us. By that virtue alone, it becomes new. All creativity is a process of editing our influences. The real question surrounding adaptation is always this. Is this that feeling? When we directly adapt something old into something new, it is because we are nostalgic. We want to feel it again. Adaptations don't want to give you that feeling again. So ask yourself this instead. Do you want to safely adopt something old, even without that feeling? Or do you want to create something new and give that feeling to someone else?
Video game ports may seem as an afterthought in many minds, but in truth, they're a fascinating balance in necessity and creative vision. Especially when games are ported to fundamentally different hardware, design choices can come along that totally change how we approach playing them. It might be smarter to slow things down. You can take advantage of new perspectives that the hardware provides, or do the work required and then completely throw in everything in the kitchen sink. You might even have a bunch of different versions of a game with its own unique concepts and fans. Sure, they may not always hit the mark, they may not have the prettiest graphics or all the bells and whistles of a definitive version, but God bless them, they tried, and I love these adorable ports for the effort they put in. So while Call of Duty on the PS3 is certainly different from the DS, the compromises in the port are an art in itself. And I'll be darned if portable zombies aren't the quaintest little experience you ever did see.
Adaptation is changing, altering, converting, or reconstructing something. It is about taking the essence of something and transforming it, taking it to new places. In this sense, maybe we could say covers of songs are adaptations, or at least covers of songs that transform meaning are adaptations, ones that are different enough to the original. One of the greatest examples of this is Nothing Compares to You, a song written by Prince for his band The Family in 1985. Later transformed and adapted by Sinead O'Connor in her more popular version from 1990. Through changes in instrumentation, lyrics, and vocal delivery, Sinead's version affirms a uniquely female perspective. The composition is understated, flowing with lyrics that are melancholic, simultaneously specific and relatable. You can hear Sinead's pain as much as you see it in the now iconic music video. Sinead's version adapted Prince's original track, lifting it to a powerful space in popular and musical culture.
This is a cell. Like all cells, it is born from an existing cell. By extension, all cells were ultimately born from one cell.
I don't remember anything after we reached the tree line. None of us do.
One by one, all gone, except you. How do you explain that? It was mutating our environment. It was destroying everything.
It wasn't destroying. It was changing everything. The mutations were subtle at first. More extreme as we grew closer to the lighthouse. Corruptions of form. Duplicates of form.
Duplicates.
Echoes.
Shakespeare's body of work may have been long forgotten if it wasn't for the various adaptations we see every year. However, of all of their adaptations of their work, there's one creative who stands out for me, Akira Kurosawa. The famous Japanese director directed 3 film adaptations of Shakespeare: Throne of Blood, based on Macbeth; The Bad Sleep Well, based on Hamlet; and Ran, based on King Lear. Kurosawa's entire filmography drew clear inspiration from Western culture, while still remaining distinctly Japanese, with all 3 of his adaptations recontextualizing their respective place to bring in a distinct element of Japanese culture to their story. Both Throne of Blood and Ran take similar approaches to adaptation, choosing a feudal samurai-era setting and taking a huge amount of visual and structural inspiration from Noh theatre. The themes of the original plays take to this era brilliantly too, with both stories predominantly being about justice, loyalty, and ambition. However, The Bad Sleep Well is a standout adaptation, with several liberties taken to make the Danish via British story of Hamlet one that would resonate with a post-war Japan. The film takes place in a contemporary Japan, taking on a lot of noir visual language, especially similar to Kurosawa's Drunken Angel and Stray Dogs, showing nihilism prevalent in Japan after its defeat in the war. Kurosawa's Shakespeare adaptations show the power of adaptations to make stories, themes, and characters resonate with different audiences in different ways, crossing borders and time, even when those stories were written hundreds of years prior.
There's an idea that with the creation of cell phones, it has made things difficult for setting a film in present day, because phones solve so many problems, and I don't think this idea is necessarily wrong. But I do think we haven't perfected a way to incorporate a smartphone society in a cinematic language. But Sundance's release, R#J, tried to do that very thing. R#J is an adaptation of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and at first I rolled my eyes at the mere mention of a hashtag in the context of such a classical piece, but watching it was a very different thing. It leans so far into the present day. There's posts that Romeo makes proclaiming his love, there's Mercutio giving a soliloquy on a live stream, and so many other social media tie-ins to an age-old classic. I guess I think this verdict is still out on if new technology can be present in film, as more films attempt to include it. And I guess I'd rather people try something new like R#J than only telling stories set pre-2010s.
There's a certain wizardry to adapting material from one medium to another. Most often we think about how books or games are adapted into movies, but there are all sorts of weird ones out there, like when an anime is turned into a tabletop game, or a video game becomes a slot machine. But I'm incredibly impressed by the way Larian Studios adapted Dungeons & Dragons to video games. Through years of development by an incredibly talented team, they've managed to adapt something about Dungeons & Dragons that no other studio before them has. The characterization and role-playing is frankly unparalleled. For example, did you know that every single party member has their own unique underwear on their character sheet, and they all have unique underwear jokes, and you can trade the underwear between the party members, and you can sell it for gold if you want to, or you can take it off? Underwear.
Queer representation hasn't always been present in mainstream media, so queer people have had to adapt these stories to create the representation they want to see. One of the ways that people have done this is through fanfiction, especially shipping. Shipping can be a meaningful way to engage with art and find community in the process. Sometimes these characters do things that feel like they must be in love, fighting like an old married couple, prioritizing each other's safety over everything else. But is it so hard to imagine that two people could be that close without romantic love? Are we erasing the meaningful platonic relationships that are already in the text? These relationships mean a lot to me as deep and loving platonic relationships. Kirk and Spock or Batman and Superman show me what these kinds of deep friendships can look like and give me hope that I can find that too. But that feeling is very similar to what a lot of queer people get out of shipping characters of the same gender. We are all just looking for a way to see ourselves in the media we love. So I choose to hold space for both. After all, adaptation does not have to mean erasure.
Avatar: The Last Airbender now has 2 bad adaptations. If you want a good adaptation, you need to turn to the fans. One of the best Avatar fanfics out there is Enslaved by Sharkflip. In it, the 4 nations are reimagined to highlight what Sharkflip finds so compelling about them. It takes the cultural diversity of Avatar's world and expands upon it using its real-world references as a source of drama. People from different nations don't speak the same language, and the worldviews being expressed through their languages are a constant source of misunderstanding and conflict. The story is about as different from Avatar's as it could be. It's a contemplative romance with adult characters. Yet, it somehow feels truer to the original than the 2 live-action adaptations, both of which copy quite a lot from the original. They tried to accomplish a terribly banal goal. What if Avatar but with meat bodies? Cool. By contrast, Sharkflip's goal is much loftier. She's trying to communicate what she saw as special during her experience with the text. And that's telling, isn't it? Maybe all readings of a text are adaptations in and of themselves.
One of my favorite things about a successful adaptation from a creative perspective is the ability for fans in the director's chair to get more people into the original source material and enjoy it as much as them, which is how I describe the Shin Japan Heroes trilogy of films. These tokusatsu movies adapt some of the biggest series in Japan and take them back to their roots, both modern special effects and filmmaking. Shin Godzilla explores the fallout of disaster, Shin Ultraman explores sci-fi concepts in order to show the best of humanity coming together, and Shin Kamen Rider is a hype, action-packed romp of charismatic characters and a focus on the inner conflicts of man. These movies get the raw core thematic appeals of their franchises down in digestible 2-hour movies for both newcomers and hardcore fans to enjoy, while still being distinctly stylish and high-quality entries in their respective franchises. You can tell Shinji Higuchi, Hideaki Anno, and the rest of the crew on these films really love the material they're working with. And while fan love isn't the most important thing for a good adaptation, it certainly can help it.
As a non-binary, mixed white and black Caribbean person who grew up in a predominantly Asian area and studied in a predominantly white environment, I stand at a lot of intersections, often finding myself engaging with completely different groups of people. And depending on which set of the Venn diagram I'm talking to, I find myself feeling the need to perform to fit that set, even if it's just by selectively downplaying or exaggerating parts of myself. I don't talk the way I do around my white relatives the way I do my black relatives. I don't talk the way I do with my relatives the way I do with my friends. I don't talk about the same things with different groups of friends. If I want to talk about something, or even just indulge in part of myself, I can find at least one person to do so with, but rarely do I find myself able to speak in my entirety. Always thinking, considering, shifting, adapting, but rarely just being. Well, there is one place I can be myself.
Inspired by the myth of the Tower of Babel, Chants of Sennaar introduces you to a mysterious tower in which the residents are divided by literal language barriers. You're a newcomer, tasked with deciphering that language through context cues and using your newfound vocabulary to deepen your understanding of its people. Language here is more than just a puzzle to solve, though. Narratively, it's a way of stratifying people into social classes, excluding them from conversations. Of particular note are the pejoratives people in one class might use to refer to those below them. At times, you have no choice but to be complicit in that verbiage if you want to fit in, or even just make yourself heard. As uncomfortable as the game might make you feel in these moments, it sends a clear message. You can't bend another language, a culture, to retrofit your own standards. You have to meet someone halfway. But Sennaar isn't content to leave its thesis there, its status quo unshaken. Perhaps through clever wordplay, you can find a way to communicate something new through that existing language anyway. Maybe the people of the tower could stand to meet each other somewhere halfway too.
Unlike real life, the player exerts a massive amount of control over the Minecraft world, but even with this power, the player is still constrained by random events. Lightning strikes, and the unpredictable behavior of mobs are just a few of these random events. In my first survival world in 2012, a creeper was hiding and blew up just outside of my house once I opened my door in the morning. I luckily survived, but I was faced with the harsh reality of a deep crater where my door once stood. Would I use cobblestone to roughly patch this hole and pretend like it never happened? Or would I accept this failure and leave my house open and vulnerable to the hostile creatures of the night? Instead, I patched the hole from the outside and used the natural formation of the crater to make a basement storage area inside my house. This storage area ended up being one of my favorite things in that house. The creeper unknowingly made my base better because I was able to turn failure into a success. Just like the accidental invention of the creeper from a coordinate mistake, Minecraft taught me that adaptation is about taking the cards you were dealt and turning it into something that works to your advantage.